everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of On the Line. I'm Joe Rexrode here at the Tennessean Studios. We are talking college football. We've got three topics as always. We've got some new panelists. And actually, we're going to start Memphis, UCF. Evan Barnes, you cover Memphis. It's a big game this week. UCF, one of the few undefeateds out there. Are we talking enough about reigning national champion UCF?
I like that, reigning national champion, because I guess they did finish first in one computer poll. I honestly feel like they're not being talked about as much, and I think part of that is because their schedule just hasn't been as impressive. I mean, they haven't really beaten – the only Power 5 team they beat was Pittsburgh, who hasn't had such a great year. So I think this weekend against Memphis, just because everyone remembers how great that game was last year in the AAC title game, I think this game will probably, put UCF on the radar if they win. And then after that, we'll see what happens at the end of the season when they face South Florida and Cincinnati, because both of those teams are ranked, and the AAC East is much stronger than the West this year. So if UCF can win this game and then run the table and then beat South Florida and Cincinnati, then I think by that point they'll be in the conversation for the playoff.
Anybody else? You buying UCF? Scott Frostless, UCF?
Not really. I mean, it's one of those that they, you gotta, with only 4 spots, it's those are so hard to come by that I don't, even an undefeated AAC champion is going to have a hard time beating a 1-loss SEC champion or even a runner-up if they're undefeated going to the title game. So, I mean, if you're talking undefeated Georgia, undefeated Alabama, they're not going to trump one of them in that scenario. So, I mean, it's going to be really difficult regardless. And then, of course, we'll get into it a little bit later, but Texas, if they run the table now, they're pretty strong up there. They'll have the resume that will supersede anything UCF does, in the regular season. So I don't buy them at all right now.
Well, Joe, the only reason the UCF could do it this year is because they kind of did it last year. Usually with these things, we catch up a year later. So, if you look at UCF and Cincinnati and South Florida, they're all undefeated in the same conference, but UCF is a top 10 team right now because they started in the preseason poll and the other two didn't. So if, we used to see this with Boise State, if you're a good mid-major and you make a case to be, in the playoff or in the BCS or whatever, we tend to catch up with you next year and give you the benefit of the doubt. UCF is now being given the benefit of the doubt because they did it last year. So if they can repeat this year as undefeated, they'll be given a little more credit of what maybe they deserved a year ago.
Mike Wilson.
Yeah, I think we're talking about them enough. I think it's the perfect level. What I think we're not talking about enough is how good Mackenzie Milton is. I love that kid's game. He kind of broke out with that last year. I think he needs to be talked about more. But without Scott Frost, UCF just kind of lacks that presence and persona, I think, that drew them so much attention last year. And on the note of the Memphis game, Memphis was better last year. The Riley Ferguson element added a lot to that too. That matchup was so exciting both times, especially the second one. And that helped put UCF on a bigger stage. They're not going to get that this year. They just don't have that same level of opponent that they're going to get. Conference title game, Memphis this week, whatever it is. They just don't have that anymore.
Cincinnati's pretty good, Mike. But, yeah, obviously, for any legit discussion about them getting into that 4, it's going to take major carnage. Speaking of carnage, Texas beats Oklahoma, stunning a lot of people. Texas on a roll since that ugly loss to Maryland. I put it to you guys. Is Texas back?
Joe, Texas is back in the Big 12, but they're not back to where we think of them nationally, back to the Vince Young days. Yeah, they could win the Big 12, but does that mean they can match up with an Ohio State or an Alabama? I'm not so sure. The thing that hurts them a little bit here is Big 12 teams play non-conference games. So all that we saw of them out of conference was losing to Maryland and beating USC, and beating USC doesn't mean a whole lot these past couple of years. So there's not really a barometer of how good of a team they are, except wins within the Big 12 conference. And right now I think that's a good conference. It's not a great one.
But Oklahoma's supposed to be a national title contender, right?
Yeah, they're also just in the same conference. Stick them in the SEC, and that's a 3-loss team.
No argument there. It's Texas has always relied on having that big name quarterback, and I think they obviously have that in Ellinger. now that they haven't had really since Colt McCoy. And so I think that's what's helping, the visual of Texas being back right now and seeing what he did against Oklahoma is certainly impressive. But, I agree with Adam. I don't know quite if they're to the level of you're talking an actual national championship contender kind of back level yet.
Yeah, if you're talking about if Texas is really a top 10 team, I mean, I guess by the numbers and the rankings, but are they really back? I remember Texas winning 10 games nearly every year in the 2000s. This team is good, but until they get back to that point, they're not back. But for this season, it's going to be talking about Texas again. Because I think college football is better when Texas is relevant and not just as a team that's, we're wondering when they're going to get back. They're back in the conversation. They beat a good Oklahoma team, and they were physically stronger than that Oklahoma team. I thought they just muscled them out of the way as the game wore on, and that's something Texas hasn't had in a while. So I think you can start talking about Texas being back, but I think we'll see what happens as the Big 12 race keeps going.
Somehow you keep cleaning up, Mike Wilson.
Yeah, that was my role in slow pitch softball, too. That's something I'm really comfortable with. Texas being back is such a fun Twitter joke. Every time they win a game, I mean, beating Maryland is a Texas is back moment. Great little shtick, similar to the Mac Brown recruited Robert Griffin and what's his face is a safety. Just fun stuff. Johnny Manziel's a safety. I'm not buying them yet. They've still got to beat some teams. I mean, this is the year that we're looking at. There's 4 good teams that we see: Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Is Texas good? Is Oklahoma good? It seems like there's 4 teams. Everyone else is just kind of beating each other at this point. So I'm not really buying anyone outside of those top 4, and that includes Texas.
Yeah, I'm not really buying anybody outside of Alabama, but that's just me. Speaking of Alabama, speaking of Texas, Oklahoma, Kyler Murray, I thought it was a really compelling Heisman race. And look, I mean, you lose a game and you lose ground in that race. Guys, and this is my first time, I think, publicly trying to say his name without completely botching it, but it's Tua Tagovailoa. That wasn't very good. Is he a lock for the Heisman? I blew that badly, didn't I? Man, I'm so bad at that. Is he a lock?
I think as far as going to New York, I don't think that's a question. Obviously, there's still a lot of football left to be played, a lot of things to happen, but, I mean, I think he's certainly one of the 3 or 4 top candidates to get the invite. And right now, his stats kind of speak for themselves. I mean, he's potentially going to set 3 or 4 NCAA records if he continues to maintain where he's at right now, the 230 passer rating and everything like that is so far above it, really anything we've seen even last year with Baker and some of those things. So I don't think there's a question of him being in New York at least.
Yeah, I think you can go ahead and book that flight from Tuscaloosa to New York. I honestly think Kyler Murray, to me, he should still be in the conversation because he single-handedly almost brought Oklahoma back into that game. And I think, to me, I don't necessarily penalize guys for losing so much unless they just play horribly. And I thought Kyler Murray just showed that he still is as dynamic as anyone in the country. So I think I wouldn't hand the award to Tua just yet. I'll just be curious, what will Tua's numbers be? And if he plays a 4-quarter game, at least if he plays 3 4-quarter games, because if he puts up these numbers in limited action, then we're talking about maybe one of the best seasons we've seen in a long time.
Well, that's the thing. Everything that's in his favor, being the quarterback on the best team in the country and all the stats and all that helps him. The only drawback that Tua would have is that Alabama's winning these games by so much there's no moment. Usually a Heisman Trophy winner has that kind of highlight moment in the big game where he had some kind of highlight reel thing. He's sitting in the second half. So is he going to have any kind of those moments? I would almost say it could be a bad moment at this point. The only thing that could hurt him, maybe he throws a couple of pick sixes in the Iron Bowl. Maybe he plays poorly at LSU. But Alabama has to have a competitive game for us to even get close to him having a Heisman winning moment.
I mean, I question as far as, if they're beating teams the way he's doing. I mean, I don't know if he needs that Heisman moment. There have been guys that have won it just because, they're the best player in the country. And I think he's showing that he's the best player on the best team. Obviously, like I said, there's still quite a bit of football, so things can happen. Like you said, they could lose a game here or there. They could have a slip up, and that could certainly hurt his chances. But if he maintains what he's doing now, I don't see there really being much competition. Kyler being an option, of course, but he just seems to be doing so much more than everybody else right now. I don't think there's a question.
Bring us home, Mike Wilson.
Cleanup time again. I think Alex's point there is big. There's no one else doing what Tua is doing at this point. But what I wonder about these final 6-7 games for these teams is Tua's still got to face some really tough defenses that Alabama hasn't necessarily seen yet this year. Whereas you look at a Kyler Murray or a Will Grier who had a not good game last week, but those guys are going to play some really bad Big 12 defenses. Are they going to get that opportunity to put up big enough numbers to overcome what Tua's already done? But right now, Tua's season, he's making Baker Mayfield's Heisman campaign look like chump change. And that's pretty impressive to do. So certainly going to New York, but I wonder about that back half of the schedule where they get those LSUs and Auburns and those better defenses, and maybe that influences that a little bit. But right now, it doesn't look like anything will slow him down.
That just means he gets more snaps, so he doesn't have to. He's passing for 250 a game and half a game. It's ridiculous. He is a lot because they're a lock to win every game, but we have more football to claim that we have to wait to see to find that out. Thanks, guys. Great panel. I honestly, Sparks, I think your Heisman moment take, I like that one today because even though it was well counterpointed by Alex, I think you're right that most of these guys do have some sort of moment in an iconic game. I think of Marcus Mariota a few years ago. I mean, usually there's something like that. I don't think it'll stop him from doing it, but still, good point. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll be back next week on the Line.